Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be diving a little bit into the S.A.I.D principle and why it's important when you're designing training programs. So let's get right into it. So the S.A.I.D principle, it stands for specific adaptations to imposed demands. So another way of thinking about it is getting really good at what you practice. However, when we look at this and if you want to build an efficient program, right? You want to kind of look into what aspects of the principle are we looking at so we can make a really good program. So, getting into it, what we want to train for is the adaptation to an exercise alongside the bioenergetics of the exercise, right? So you can manipulate exercises a multitude of different ways, right? You can change up how you load the exercise, change up the lever arms associated with the exercise itself, right? There's so many ways you can change it up, but you want to have your body be able to adapt to the stimulus that you're trying to achieve, and that's necessary to perform well in either your sport or any other physical endeavor that you're trying to complete, right? So it's a little bit more than just the exercise being done. However, in my opinion, there's certain sports that may utilize specific exercises moreover than other sports, right? So let's say you are an Olympic weightlifter or a power lifter or any other barbell sport athlete, right? There are going to be there's during those competitions, most if not all the time, they're going to be utilizing some form of an exercise that you're going to use in the gym to, compete against other fellow lifters or athletes for that matter. So let's say you are a power lifter. You're going to want to train the squat, the bench, and the deadlift in competition. When you're an Olympic weightlifter, now I haven't competed in Olympic weightlifting myself, but snatch and the clean and jerk, you want to get really good at those exercises when you are peaking for a meet, so that you can perform that exercise with technical efficiency and be able to produce lots of force to lift up the loads that you need to load or to lift to either set a personal record or win the meet if you're able to, just something like that, right? Um, but you are still tailoring the training leading up to that with the associated energy systems and for that sport, for the lifts that are associated or with the exercises that are associated. In my opinion, though, with if you were to take, let's say, a basketball player, football player, soccer player, swimmer, anything, right? You can change up the exercises in so many different ways, right? That most, if not all, exercises are going to be beneficial in some form or fashion. Now, granted, there may be better exercises for what you're trying to achieve, but you want to train for the adaptation to the exercise, and you may want to tailor the program around the bioenergetics associated with that exercise. So what are bioenergetics? Bioenergetics is another way of saying how we transfer energy or how we utilize different energy sources and put that out into our system so we can use it to create ATP needed for exercise, essentially. So it's taking different forms of like energy. So you take like your carbs, your fats, your proteins, and transferring this into ATP so we can use it for exercise. Even lactic acid, when we cycle it back through gluconeogenesis, so we create glucose again, we're utilizing these different energy sources so that we can use them to pretty much physically operate, right? One thing I wanted to touch on here is most rep ranges can be beneficial. Now, there's the saying where it's like that 5 to 30 rep range is usually most hypertrophic, right? Anything above 30 reps, it may be difficult, like within a single set, right? It may be difficult to impose a stimulus that's required for solid adaptation out of that. Now, you can argue different sides to that story, but generally speaking, 5 to 30 reps within a set is going to impose the stimulus that you need for sufficient growth with mechanical tension. So when we were talking about the bioenergetics, right, there are usually three main energy systems that we want to look at. We have the ATP PCR system or the phosphocreatine. We have the anaerobic glycolysis or like the lactic acid system. And then we have the aerobic metabolism, right? So one thing that you want to notice in this chart here is there's almost never a time where one energy system is at play. We can emphasize one energy system over the other, but there's almost never a time where only one is at play, not to my knowledge, of course. So when we are designing a training program, right, we want to be able to tailor our training program and our exercises with intensity and duration to the the physical endeavor that we want to be able to complete. So let's say you are a track runner, right? You are an 800-meter sprinter. You may, I mean, unless you're breaking world records and you're going below that 10-second mark somehow, or the 20, 30-second mark somehow, that's pretty incredible. But to my knowledge, I don't really know many people that are doing that with 800 with an 800-meter sprint. So one thing that you want to be able to tailor your exercise program around is maybe like that anaerobic glycolysis. So if we look at my cursor here, anaerobic glycolysis is going to be more so in this like yellow orangish line. So we can see that it's, not really too active before we hit 30 seconds or so. And then once we get up to that like minute to 2 minute mark, we are at our peak kind of like that peak duration of intensity and length of the exercise, where anaerobic glycolysis is really going to be emphasized here. Yes, we are using a little bit of aerobic metabolism and we're using a little bit of ATP PCR, but what we can see, I mean, there's crossover points here at the 30-second mark, but what we can see is during that 2 minute mark, we are really using that kind of energy system. So when we are programming exercises, we want to be able to utilize the duration and the intensity of the exercise and program it around the bioenergetics associated with the desired needs to impose the adaptation that we want to achieve so we can perform well in that sport. If you look at like the ATP PCR system or the phosphocreatine, it is really emphasized at, like less than 10 seconds, right? That's because we are looking for exercises that produce a lot of power or that we need to be able to utilize high bursts of energy very quickly, right? So if you think about it, like let's say you are an Olympic weightlifter, a power lifter, you are a track sprinter, like you're running the 100-meter dash, you're going to be using a lot of that phosphocreatine system. Now, yes, you like if you look at creatine monohydrate, it's going to help out with this kind of system, right? But what we want to be able to, like we mentioned before, we want to be able to tailor exercises and our training to impose the adaptation that's required for these kind of bouts of exercise. So, like I mentioned before, there's almost, to my knowledge, there's almost never a time where one energy system is only at play. It's more so that these energy systems are going to be emphasized during an exercise or during any kind of activity. So what are some big takeaways that we want to take away from the S.A.I.D principle? So when we remind ourselves of the S.A.I.D principle, it is specific adaptations to imposed demands. So when we are building a program, a productive exercise program, here are some things that I think that could be beneficial when we are designing a program. You want to choose exercises that you will enjoy and will perform, right? I think exercises that you enjoy and will perform are going to really help with your ability to keep adherence to an exercise program and to impose the adaptation that you desire or that you need to perform whatever endeavor you're trying to do. Workouts can be altered or modified if the need arises, and we are trained to adapt to a stimulus. There's going to be times where you're going to need to alter the exercises from day to day because, life happens, right? But we're going to need to be able to change things around. Granted the circumstances, whatever occurs, we need to be able to be flexible like that. So we need to be able, but we need to keep in mind the adaptation that we are trying to achieve with regard to the exercise and the bioenergetics associated with that exercise itself. Um, Third bullet point here is you don't always need to be super specific with the exercises to impose a specific stimulus. I mean, granted, there's going to be times where in certain situations where this may be necessary, but you want to remind yourself of your goal. if your goal is to get a bigger squat and you're not training for a competition, look at the musculature that's associated with the squat. Yes, there's axial loading because the bar is going down. If you look at your center mass and your spine, it's axial loaded. But you can train your erector spinae, you can train your hamstrings, your quads, your calves, your adductors, all those extra. You can train all of those muscle groups without the squat. But if you're going to go into a competition, it may be necessary to include those kind of exercises like the squat, bench, deadlift, clean and jerk, those kind of exercises into your programming so that you get better at them and you get more technically efficient with them so you get really good at performing them. But there may be times where that's not necessary and you're just looking to impose a stimulus. And that could be in a multitude of different exercises. You want to train for the energy system adaptation, so like the bioenergetics of the sport. We've mentioned this a lot so far today, but you want to train for your ability, your body's ability and capacity within that kind of emphasized energy system so you perform well either in your game or your any kind of physical endeavor that you're trying to achieve. And then one of the bigger takeaways is most gym sessions are trained to produce and absorb force. One thing I don't have on here is acceleration and deceleration, cutting, pivoting, like those kind of things. Like if you're a cross player, soccer player, one thing that we want to take into consideration is our ability to do that, to decelerate and accelerate and pivot and cut so it reduces our likelihood of injury so we don't have a ton of ACL or MCL tears, right? Or anything like that. We want to reduce our likelihood of that happening by strength training in the gym, right? We can increase the stretch reflex, improve the neural efficiency of our body. So the stretch reflex is essentially one way that our body kind of reacts to like an imposed stimulus that we weren't kind of ready for, right? So it's almost like a protective mechanism, right? So we are training that to become a little bit more sensitive to those kind of stimuli so that we don't get either as hurt or we're more prepared, right? It's almost like a protective mechanism. Improve neural efficiency, right? When we look at neural efficiency, we're looking at a lot of times neural drive, how we can improve our motor unit recruitment so that we're able to move heavier loads, we're able to produce more force, and so that we're stronger, right? You want to be strong when you go into your competitions. So you're able to produce more force, you're able to absorb force, so so you get less, there's less likelihood of injury. And then last but not least, you also just want to be more technically efficient at whatever you're trying to do. So to kind of summarize all this up, so we mentioned what the SAID principle stands for, specific adaptations to imposed demands. You want to train the bioenergetics of the sport alongside whatever exercises that may be helpful or beneficial. But look for the bioenergetics so that we're two of some of the biggest factors that go into that are the time and the duration and the intensity behind each exercise, because those play a vast role into um, the the energy systems being used within that physical endeavor or sport that you're trying to accomplish. Um, and then you can change exercises in so many different ways, but you want to make sure that you adapt to the stimulus so you get bigger, stronger, and have less likelihood of injury. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. If you guys have a comment, drop them in the comment section below. I'm always trying to learn this stuff as I'm going through this. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and here's to getting strong. Thanks for watching.